Welcome, everyone, to Enough to Keep Going. This is our main show. This is Tuesday night. This is Enough to Keep Going. If you are watching this, congratulations, because you found us. We've been hitting the underground, trying to avoid detection on YouTube, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now, with us tonight for our 16th episode is Zeus Adamus, Glacius, Glassicles. However, I choose to pronounce it 3 different ways tonight. And maybe I'll eventually get it. But, maybe since tonight we are going to be talking about Destiny and Destiny 2, maybe I'll just chalk it up to the Galahorn-Yalahorn debate over Destiny 1 and say that depending on where you are in the regions of the world, you may pronounce Zeus's name in a variety of different ways, right? Heracles versus Hercules, it all works out. So, Zeus, you are here tonight. It is just the two of us, because we can make it if we try. I know, it's bad puns and songs and mispronunciations. I am full of it tonight. But I'm also full of a lot of gear, a lot of engrams, and a lot of conversation about Destiny 2. So tonight we have kicked off Swiss and Prime because they
didn't play the game.
They did not play the game that we want to talk about. So we have given them almost a whole month, and they have not chosen to drink the Guardian Kool-Aid and follow along with our journey back to the light. So Zeus, you have finished the campaign, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about kind of our thoughts and reflections on where things are within Destiny 2, how that compares within the original game, some systems, some broken pieces that are still being worked out as every week they take it down on servers. But first, let's talk a little bit of housekeeping and why are we coming late and on an odd channel. So there's been some background stuff going on that you've been dealing with, Zeus, and I really appreciate, all of us do on the network, appreciate the work you've been doing. But can you give the listeners and viewers a little bit of an update of where we're at and why we're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll open with saying stay tuned and hang on, because I just don't know where we're going to wind up right now. So while attempting to get the show started for what we call Nights in the Kitchen, which is our entertainment cruise podcast that was covering the Defenders. It was our final episode, the network's original TV show, The Defenders. First of all, I was very tired, got a little sleep, and for some reason I got a stroke of creative flair or something, and I thought that maybe by adding in the word Netflix in the title of the Hangout before we went live, that we would get a few more hits and send out a little more signal on Twitter when we posted the link, and on Facebook when I posted the link to the live show and eventually to the archive version. I did not get the attention I wanted. What I attracted was the attention of apparently YouTube's takedown algorithm, and as I immediately, within milliseconds of clicking the start Google Hangout link, the live show was immediately intercepted and stopped electronically, and any remnant of the 4% residual of the startup of the Hangout was taken down. So my live stream as I started it was immediately intercepted by a YouTube bot, I assume, and taken down, and our privileges to live stream were immediately revoked. So Wednesday night or Sunday night, and again tonight for this show, I had to start the Hangout and host it from my personal YouTube channel, and then at some point, I guess I will pull the video down and forklift it over to the E2KG channel. So what YouTube was reacting to was the use of the word Netflix, as far as I could tell, in our title. We have never and will never illegally use illegally and knowingly post copyrighted content on our channel. So on my gaming channel, that I've done that mistakenly, because as you often hear me talk in the voiceover commentary on there, lots of times the the music in a game is sometimes copyrighted, and the problem is you don't know, right? So it particularly happens in EA games, and so if you live stream or do a video capture and post a video of a game, sometimes you get a copyright hit. Rarely is it ever enough to actually trigger a takedown notice. In this instance, YouTube blocked our video from being live streamed, revoked our live stream privileges, and took down like the literally 4 seconds of video that started up, triggering simply on the use of the term Netflix. The email that I received claimed that that they were alerted and that the content was reviewed. My perspective is, well, you couldn't have reviewed the content because I hadn't live streamed anything. If a human being did review the content, there was nothing for them to review. So we've appealed the revocation of those privileges. But what concerns me a little bit is that I haven't heard a peep from YouTube. Now, in my past experiences, when I have gotten alerts or contacted by YouTube for some reason, I have the impression that there is YouTube staff that is on 24/7, because I have posted complaints or a concern and seen a response to an email that I've sent, or a ticket that I've sent in, frequently within an hour, and this is often at midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning. I haven't heard a peep from any appeals representatives at YouTube. My concern is I don't want to go for more than this week. So we already had to do the Nights in the Kitchen final episode off axis. I don't want to go for more than a week, which would be tonight's core gaming show and the news show on Thursday, having to do this workaround. Mainly because it's going to cause a problem with our metrics, because if I put it on this channel and it gets views, then I pull the video down and then post it over on another channel, we lose those views. Now, our views aren't huge, but it's still, just from an organization perspective, it bugs me that I know there's going to be hits and views that we'll have lost track of. And just because in general, when something like this happens and a vendor or a provider doesn't respond quickly enough, I typically take a scorched earth approach. So in order to not have this problem again, I'm starting to formulate some ideas and recommendations to discuss with the E2KG staff on where we might want to move our live streams to. And we would continue the channel here and post edited video. But I'm considering pitching to the crew and to DBQ some considerations of, do we move our live show to Twitch or Mixer, or potentially directly to Twitter live streams or Facebook live streams. So I've got to kick around some of the technology required to make that happen. But stay tuned. And also, until we make that decision, or until our privileges are reinstantiated, we will probably be doing our live shows here on my personal channel, which isn't actually listed in my lower third. That's my gaming channel. On YouTube, my personal channel is just under my personal name and brand, Agasicles Stamus. So you will be able to find it there.
So thank you, Agasicles, in terms of just not only dealing with the headache of this, but also kind of keeping everybody up to date and informed in terms of what's going on. You know, everything that you've said matches up exactly with the information trail you've been leaving within the rest of the staff and the E2KG network. So I really appreciate that, and I know this is a headache, and maybe it is time. Maybe it's time to think about what other alternatives we do. You know, thinking about Twitch or Mixer also opens up some other avenues in terms of playing and discussing at the same time. You know, so there are some potential things that this may open doors for, even as we irritatedly try to deal with the ones that are being closed for us.
Yeah, and I want to put it in perspective, right? Because I always like to do that. Look, I get that we're a garage band kind of podcast, so we're not depending on this for our livelihood. I also get that this is an incredibly microscopic event in a week where we've just had Las Vegas, Charlottesville in the past 60 days, and 2 major hurricanes that have struck Puerto Rico and Florida. So, you know, I'm not trying to paint this as some tragedy. I'm mainly trying to communicate and convey information to other podcasters and game streamers who have similar 2 channels that are similar to ours, just so you're kind of aware of some of the service processes behind the technologies that we use.
Yeah, and thank you for the very appropriate call out on the rest of the world. And this is a very small problem in a week filled with, in a year and life filled with lots of bigger threatening issues. So thank you for taking time for that. I'm gonna take a deep pause and totally transition into something frivolous and not meaningful after taking a moment within the reality of the world to talk about some Destiny 2. Right?
Let's have some fun. We've dealt with all the serious stuff.
All right. Okay. Hold on. Let me take my giant glass of water. And yes, so let's talk about Destiny 2. So you finished the campaign. So here I am. I am level, power level 255, 257 I got to over the last couple days. I've got some gear that brings me up to, I've got a couple of exotics that are power 263. So again, I'm not quite ready to dive into any of the big endgame content. I could do some Nightfalls, but I haven't finished the story. So tell me what your thoughts on, I think we could talk about both story and about kind of systems and a number of kind of peripherally components in terms of what Bungie is doing with some of the paraphernalia around Destiny in terms of clans and guided games and other pieces there as well. So, but let's start with narrative. So they've given us a story that's a whole lot more clear cut, or they've given us a story that is not just lore. What were your thoughts on it, Zeus?
Yeah, so just real quick before diving into that, I just want to kind of maybe do a little stage setting for everyone. The significance or the importance of this for DBQ and I is gameplay, I'll say consumption style, right? And in our history, both together and with this game and with the rest of the E2KG crew, back to our days of Band of Gamers, is that I didn't dive full force into Destiny when it first came out. I got it, I played it, and then I set it aside, and I really didn't literally come back to it for about 2 years, really until fall of last year. I always found the story confusing. I didn't understand the different consumption styles as far as like strikes, raids. All that stuff was foreign to me, and partially because I refused, and I continue to refuse to go participate in the lore sketches on Bungie.net. Now, DBQ approached it differently in his consumption. I won't define that. I'll let you do that, DB, when you get to your part. But point is that we've significantly flipped the script, right? This time I pounded my way through the single player campaign because I wanted to complete that. DBQ, who was much more deeply steeped in this than I was, has yet to finish the campaign, and is playing a lot of the side content, which arguably is what I did the first time. I played a lot of the side content without a lot of the backup and knowledge of what I was playing, and I was periodically hitting the story and like, this is janky, and like, I don't understand this. Well, no crap, dude. Like, you played it like one episode, like strung across like 24 months. So
even if you would have played them all consecutively
right.
within vanilla Destiny, it would have been a whole different. Yeah, it still wouldn't have been. It still would have been janky, right? It wasn't until the Taken King and they remixed some of the storylines to at least provide a little bit of continuity, but still nothing compared to what they're trying to weave within a more cohesive, tighter, and smaller scope narrative here, right? Where the first one was very much about this kind of grand scale space opera-y. There's this darkness coming, and here's all these, other races. Never really explaining a whole lot of anything, but threw a lot of potential out into the world. And this one really tightens the focus down, gives you a big bad to rally against and to eventually defeat, and basically kind of reset the clock back to what it was before the game started.
Yeah, so my feelings on it, on the narrative, is it's a little different, and in my mind, admittedly, Destiny 2 has a certain advantage, right? They don't have to world build that's already been done. They have the ability to do a tighter story because they're not trying to teach you and train you about all of this history and what Guardians are. Lots of things that were pretty deep topics that had to be conveyed in the first Destiny are just kind of hand-waved casually in this one, right? The topic of this notion that the Guardians have ghosts, and the purpose of the ghost is to resurrect them when they fall in battle so they can get back up and continue fighting. That's just kind of commonly accepted knowledge at this point. It was solidified in my mind through the narrative this time exactly what the Vanguard were, because I didn't get that in Destiny. It comes through a little more transparently this time, because you get a lot more dialogue and cutscenes with Zavala, Cade, and Icona. I guess there were cutscenes in the first one. I feel like there were significally less than there are in
There are
Destiny
few
2.
and far between within vanilla Destiny, and not any with the Vanguard, right? You had a cutscene on the moon when you discovered the hive. You had a cutscene on Venus when you meet the stranger and get a little bit of exposition. Again, your character talked a little bit, but it was very kind of, they weren't real set pieces. You know, they weren't really pushing a narrative forward. They were just kind of giving you a little bit of context and location setup.
Right. So that is one thing that bugged me about the cutscenes in the narrative of the story this time is I really don't understand the design choice to have your characters have a speaking part in the first one and not have a speaking part in this one. And I know that there were probably problems, and there was probably some negative criticism over your character's dialogue in the first one. In that, mainly it was very Master Chiefish. He was very. I mean, if you played a male, I'm not sure what the female voice was, but the volume. My problem with Master Chief has historically been literally if there aren't subtitles on the screen, I cannot hear what he is saying unless I'm wearing headphones. And the Destiny 1 character's voice level was only marginally louder. Thankfully, they had subtitles on a lot of those things. So I don't know if there was a negative feedback that they got from the character speaking in the first game, but they don't speak at all in this game. And it gets a little tropish when the ghost is doing all the speaking for you in Destiny 2. But overall, I found the narrative pretty inspirational. We talked a couple weeks ago about how there's this difference between something like Destiny 2 and Skylanders Imaginators, where you never get or Legend of Zelda, I guess is what we talked about. I have the same effect in Skylanders, where I never get angry at an enemy in Skylanders or Legend or Breath of the Wild. I get pissed at enemies in Destiny 2. I get angry, and my gameplay actually amps up. Like when I get hit and I get mad, I do actually move faster, shoot faster, punch people more. So it's an effect, right? And I felt like that narrative definitely also had an effect. Like when Icona, who is voiced by actress Gina Torres, in a lot of ways, Destiny 2 and Destiny 1, but especially Destiny 2 is very much like a reunion show of the cast of Firefly, as well as side characters from Angel and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So Gina Torres, of course, co-starred with Nathan
Fillion.
Nathan Fillion, yes. I wanted to call him Malcolm Reynolds, but Nathan Fillion in Firefly, and both of them at different points were guest stars across Buffy and Angel. But like her emotional conveyance of her sorrow at what is happening on Io and what happened, and how she has to acknowledge that the reason she failed was because she was scared, and she literally doesn't want to sacrifice her life. That inspired me on Io. I fought very hard on Io because I was like, I need to restore the Vanguard, right? These guys are broken without their powers. So yeah, I mean, talk to me about how you felt about the narrative so far.
So far, I mean, I think my biggest kind of in-game, in-world issue with it has really been the initial piece of how quickly you get your stuff back, right? How quickly you become an undying guardian again. And I've mentioned this a little bit on the podcast, and I kind of stuck around on the Earth for a long time until I unlocked all 3 of my subclasses, and to kind of power myself back up. And part of that, and I've kind of come to see it within a larger narrative piece of, that it isn't just this one Guardian story. It's all of us kind of coming back together to fight. Thinking of it within when you spend enough time running public events, you get really, at least I've gotten much more kind of engaged in the world of that there are a number of us Guardians kind of coming back to this fight. And so that's kind of given me an additional in-game kind of setting in terms of kind of building my own story, right? We've talked about on this podcast before, building our own stories around things. And so I've been able to kind of weave that piece along with the narrative that Bungie is giving. And I found that a lot more engaging. And so it's been beneficial for my gameplay style, which to me was, I really enjoyed the lore aspect of Destiny 1. I spent a lot of time in Destiny 1 doing strikes, doing public events, grinding for materials, kind of doing on that loop. Finished the campaign relatively quickly, but I found the enjoyment in playing with other people and being part of this group of Guardians. And so that has kind of allowed me or helped me focus on running a lot of strikes, and not even strikes yet, running a lot of public events, being in that world and kind of fighting back. And so that's been nice. And I think the story-wise, I know the big story beats. I have dug into, thank you, My Name is Bife, for giving me some lore to kind of dive into in terms of around Dominus Gall, in terms of how he was, his kind of mentor and protege, who he eventually deals with. The backstory there of Gall's mentor. Help me out, Zeus, if you remember Gall's mentor's name, but how he was kicked out of kind of the hierarchy of Cabal, and he and Gall were kind of the rebellion back against the Cabal hierarchy.
Yeah, and just before we go further, I should have, and I'll try and put this in the description of the show. So this is a spoiler show. We are going to talk about, we will try and skew away from big beats, but we are probably going to drop some things that some people may see as spoilers. But yeah, so it's essentially the Horizon Zero Dawn story, but for the bad guys. So basically, Gall was a runt who was kind of an outcast, and he was bullied. He was not given opportunities, and then he ran into this outcast. I'll call it a praetor. That's not the technical term, but they seem to all be wrapped around like Roman verbiage. So he ran into an older council or praetor who had been who was out of favor, was also an outcast, and that person kind of adopted Gall. I think Gall was orphaned and abandoned. So I guess in their society,
kind of the runt. He was the albino. He was the social, physical outcast. Yep.
Yeah, so this guy picked him up and became his mentor and trained him eventually, so he would become powerful and rise to a position of leadership, which is where he is at when the story begins.
I think it gives an enemy that is a whole lot, whether it's tangible or at least identifiable, right? That this is a it's a typical narrative. This is a story that's been told before, but it also makes it easier to grab onto and rally against, right? Your example of getting, physically and emotionally engaged and angered through it means that it's effective, right? Rather than this kind of creepy, cloudy darkness that we don't really know about,
right.
That's coming, and you need to fight to prevent it. Here's a reason to pick up a gun and really enjoy that wonderful Bungie first-person shooter gameplay.
Yeah, and Gall is definitely a part of that, right? I talk often about like the things that one of the things that motivates me is having a villain that I really cannot stand. For me, although it's maybe not the best game ever made, the most prevalent example of that was the villain in Activision's Gun, which I think was something like a 2004 game.
Yeah. PlayStation 2,
Yep.
Xbox One,
PC. Yep. Basically, the predecessor essentially to Red Dead, right? I mean, it narratively it kind of follows a similar kind of storyline. But when I got to the final boss, like I hated that dude, and it's very similar to Gaul, although there's some gameplay things that interfere with the full combination of that emotional response, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So I guess you started to get into a little bit of the gameplay design, which and where it converges with consumption, and that's probably the bulk of what I wanted to talk about and get your perspective on.
Sure.
We have a lot to talk about, I think, in this aspect, and this may spill over into a couple episodes. But let's get started. Again, how overall did you feel about the design concept of you being nerfed? Or really, you start off the game at theoretically a power level that you might have been at the end of Destiny, but then you are quickly, and I say quickly, but it's about an hour of gameplay.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the reasons I have not started a second character on the same console. Right, I now have it on Xbox as well as PlayStation 4.
Okay.
But I have not started more than one console or more than one character on each because it's a time commitment to play through that. That from the intro mission to getting your light back, that is pretty much an hour and 10 minutes, depending on how quickly you're going to try to move through it.
Yeah, I felt it was an hour with you at your Destiny 1 power level, and then it's about another 2 hours maybe to before you get your light back. So it's a chunk of time.
When I did it this weekend on Xbox One, I got through in about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 15 minutes from start to light back.
Okay. All right.
So, but because at that stage I know the drill, I know the story. I'm not taking my time because I'm afraid of dying because I kind of know the beats. So I'm sure you could speed that up, but again, it's a significant commitment to dive back in and keep that cycle going. Narratively, I get it. It makes a lot of sense. I like the aspect that you kind of have to build yourself back up. Narratively, I didn't really like I said, the fact that you built yourself back up so quickly. I think that if there's some opportunity story-wise in terms of having to do a little bit more to, that every time that you would, get in with another Vanguard, right, that there'd be another piece to build you back up. But I've been at level 20. I have all my powers. I have everything, and I have not necessarily, I don't feel like I'm missing any powers at this stage in the game. So I think it works because it puts everybody back on the same scale. I think that if the people that were really hoping to carry over their character, Bungie has telegraphed that far enough out in advance that people who were upset have already moved on, and those people that probably were really upset have hit max level within the first 2 days or so anyways. So no, I didn't really have any too many concerns with it. I think it works narratively and gameplay wise. It gets you kind of back on that treadmill hill to keep going. Did you have concerns with it?
Yeah, it bugged me. So I feel like there's a little bit of value. So from a creative aspect, I feel like there's value in playing through it once, because it does. If I lean into giving them credit, it is a bold move, right? It is something that game sequels typically don't do. It's a surprising move, particularly given the Mass Effect approach of you port your character from a previous game into the new one. You therefore start off with all of your abilities that you've gained to that point, right? So it's a relatively creatively, arguably bold move viewed from the perspective of its two different games. You and I talked a little bit about on the news show, just because I couldn't resist saying it when I hit the epiphany. But if I look at this as one game, that starting sequence is just the middle of mini games that take a very antiquated and rearward-looking game design approach, which is I'm going to let you power up, and then at the 50% waypoint, I'm going to have you be captured where there's no way for you to get out of it. I'm just going to take the control out of your hands and have you get captured. I'm going to strip you of all of your weapons and a lot of your powers and put you in a jail cell. And when you wake up, I'm going to contrive a scenario to say, escape from the jail cell, right? And you're going to take off with a pistol after having gained a rocket launcher, a sword, and you know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
I mean, that's an RPG trope from, Dungeon and Dragon, Baldur's Gate types of days, right? Of you're stuck in, and all all your armor is gone, right? And you have the club that you found, or the sword off the guard. If I'm on my wish list, right? Like, I think you could still get away with that, but it would have been a really nice nod to players to be able to actually take your character over and whatever gear you had and then have it stripped away, right? Rather than having it locked in, oh, here's this default character armor and gear set. They have all that information. I think it would have been emotionally more powerful for those players. I think the question is are there enough of them sales-wise that was meaningful, or do the metrics, going back to metrics from the beginning of this podcast, right? Like, do Bungie's metrics show them that enough people had fallen off of the original numbers of Destiny that giving them a clean slate gives everybody a chance to get back in?
So this is, at the end of the day, my problem with the overall design of that set piece. I give them the nod for the intent and what they were trying to achieve. Great planning, poor execution, because there's not enough of a differential between the power level your character conveys at the beginning, the bathtub that they supposedly get dropped into, and where you are when you come out of it and regain your light. Because, as you mentioned, I start off in this default armor that doesn't mean anything to me. I get one assault rifle and a pistol. They're not my weapons. They don't convey the power that a lot of my weapons had at the end of Destiny 1. So I feel kind of like they're stock infantry fit out with no special abilities. So I don't feel like a level 40 Guardian. I feel like a level 10 Guardian. And so when you drop me into the bathtub, it doesn't mean as much, right? Like, okay, so you took my jumping ability away, but that's kind of it. You took away my jumping ability and my ability to regenerate. I mean, or my ability to be resurrected, because you can still regenerate.
So if this is where you start, right, and you're saying we go into the bathtub where you lose your powers, and then you touch the remnant of the Traveler, and within that 90-minute mark that I was just talking about of gaining my powers back, I'm maybe not quite back to the 100%, but I'm pretty close, right? That's narratively, that was the issue for me as well, right? Like, you basically, you're coming up way too fast, right? It would have been nice if you had to climb a slower gap to get, if you were up here,
right,
you dipped all the way down,
right,
and it did take you not only the first 2 levels of the game, but
right,
it took you to level 10 or 20 to feel like you were back and now ready to take on that final enemy.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that I think the challenge there is that creates a very different system of Destiny, right? The whole game from here back to here is a different game than the end level grind above, right? And so I think that what the game that they made is that end level grind that works in this progression. But if they would have gated and limited those powers further along the path, I think it would have made the struggle feel, I don't know, to me it would have made the struggle feel more authentic and meaningful. But as a game, it probably would have turned off more people, because it there were arbitrary gates on things that were not there within the full structure of what Destiny is, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, could have. I guess I feel like it would have woven in as a more effective narrative that would have better matched the story they were trying to tell, right? Because what it would have driven you to is, first of all, it would have driven you to spend more time on Earth. Like, I feel like, and literally you can do this in the game. You get your light back, you can be gone. right? You can be like, farewell, dudes. Thanks a lot for all the help. I'm off to Titan, right? I mean, I spent very little time on Earth, in contrast to the way you played.
Sure,
You
I
remained
spent
on Earth.
almost level 18 on Earth. Yeah.
Right. And I was there very rarely, and it in the way I played, it felt disconnected. It felt like incontinuity, because every time I gained a thing that allowed me to go back and gain a subclass, then I would go back. Like the first time I went back to Earth, actually emotionally, and I know I wove a lot of this in my head, I thought I was going to get chewed out by Hawthorne.
Sure, that would make sense, right? Because she was angry when you left the first time.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think, and talking about weaving, a narrative within our heads. One of the things that I was weaving within my head was the reason I stayed on Earth to get my 3 subclasses was one of 2 ways, and depending on how you think about the Traveler, right, that I was either fending off more of the darkness and the fallen to help bring that remnant back to life to gain more power from it, or if you take the Vex approach that the Traveler is evil, and that even the remnant, that it's corrupted, right? So I spent a whole lot of time on Earth killing things, and that made the corrupted Traveler more excited or more pleased, and I gained more light. So there's all kinds of goofy lore rabbit holes that I justified,
Right.
but at the same time, truth is, I loved it.
Yeah.
The gear grind has always been to me satisfying, but they've so simplified it down. Looking back 3 years ago in the fall of 2014, and trying to figure out, okay, so with this type of gun I need spin metal, but with this type of gun I need helium filaments, and with this type of armor but if I'm this class I need a different type, and I got to go to this planet to get that, but then I also still need motes of light, and I still need to carry my gun around to be able to level it up to unlock all the perks, right? I almost said that without taking a breath. There are a lot of systems involved that the game never really explained to you.
Yeah.
And here with this, you don't have that. You get a gun, its perks are unlocked. Yes, there's mods and you can deal with that, but there's a whole lot more straightforward pieces. If you're gonna upgrade something, you don't upgrade. All you're doing is infusing, and that is clearly pictured below. Your armor. There is no armor material. You break things down, and they go to rep, and everything breaks down to the same thing. It is such a more streamlined piece, that not only in the gear in terms of moving and progressing, but also the roles, right? That a gun is a gun is a gun. It doesn't have a certain perk system on it. If you get it today, or if I get it tomorrow, or I have a 1 in 10 chance of getting this buff on it, it is consistent, and it allows for better balancing for Bungie, but it also provides less of this kind of gotcha mechanic of, well, let's see what the slot machine gives me this time.
Yeah, so you mentioned something good there that I want to interject at this point. So I like the game, right? I honestly can't stop playing it, although I have stopped playing it, but every night when I'm going to the next thing on my playlist, like I'm playing Resident Evil 7 now, I'm like, man, I'd really like to just go over there and fire up my PlayStation 4 and play some more Destiny. And one of the reasons, one of the appeals of it, it's straightforward progression. Like, it's get in, fight, kill stuff. They drop loot, you pick it up, you go to the tower or wherever to sort and sift through it, and get it decrypted, and then decide how you're going to kind of rebuild your next equipment set, and then take off and go do the same thing again. I personally love that. Some people will regard that as simplified gameplay, and the hipsters of our gaming culture will say, well, I don't want to play that. I want to go play some, Byzantine, Eastern RPG. Those are good too, but they're just different systems, right? They're complicated. They're confusing. We talk about the Born games, Bloodborne and whatever, and they have systems in there that are behind curtains that you never understand, and you can level up wrong, actually, in those types of games. So, and these aren't necessarily negatives, but again, I feel like they're the kind of things to be prepared for, particularly if you're coming from Destiny to Destiny 2. I guess my feeling is a lot of the things you described that you like, I actually feel the game is a little stingy about. The game is very stingy on upgrades, in weapon upgrades, in comparison to Destiny 1, where every weapon would typically have 4 to maybe 6 or 7 different kind of parametric upgrades in terms of capabilities. And those would cost you Glimmer to level up. And actually part of the gamification and game within the game you would hit is you would hit points where you didn't have enough Glimmer to raise that ability. The one thing is and again, it's a unspoken, undefined, unconveyed system. When you are in the equipment screen, if a weapon is a new pickup, you'll see every few seconds this shimmer or whatever kind of cross the small block icon. I think you also see that when there is an upgrade available for that weapon. In the original Destiny, if you clicked into the weapon and there was an upgrade available and you didn't purchase it, when you popped back out, that alert or whatever the visual effect was that would tell you that there was an upgrade there would not appear again until a new upgrade was available. So that's a minor thing. But in Destiny 2, there's only 2 or 3 categories of upgrades available. One of them seems to be automatically granted when you first acquire the weapon, and it's just an option to shift from the type of sight. But sometimes there's not anything more than an option to change this type of sight. And there might be 1 or 2 other categories, but they're just definitions of abilities. They're not upgrade paths. That seems to start propagating and expanding once you pass level 20.
Yes. Yep. Once you get into exotics and legendary, you get a couple choices up top. But again, not nearly the level of some would say complexity and some would say personalization, right? Like taking it positively, I agree with you that I do miss that aspect, right? Like if I get this gun, it is kind of what it is. There's nothing else I can do with it. When I got my first exotic pulse rifle, which I'm still using and infusing to upgrade, but it's basically the same gun that I've had for the last 10 hours at this stage. It is not, I'm not unlocking, experience on the gun, which then gives me X new ability. There's not this kind of gamification chase within the armor and the guns as there once was.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head, right? In the first game, the one of the mini games was kind of the longer you had a weapon and the more you used a weapon, the more you would gain basically weapon XP with that weapon and would level it up, and you could tell what weapons had been in your inventory. You kind of can in this game too, because you tend to hold on to weapons longer because there aren't as many upgrade paths. So it's simply a stock weapon rating number that you use to decide what you're going to keep and dispense with. Now, where weapons get different in this game is you have a weapon mod slot, and you can put modifications that you get as rewards or that you purchase from gunsmiths. But in order to apply those mods, it has to have a weapon mod slot, and either every weapon doesn't necessarily have a weapon mod slot, or you can certainly get mods that don't apply to different types and classifications of weapons. So I have like 12 weapons mods available. None of them apply to the weapons that I have. The other thing is, very frequently when you pick up weapons, they already have a weapon mod applied. And the part of the mechanic that works against itself is weapons mods are consumables. So you might get
I totally did this. I got rid of a legendary mod because I tried to, and I even knew that they were, I knew that mods were, I knew shaders were consumable. I didn't realize that mods were consumable, right? I got an exotic piece of gear that had a nice legendary purple mod on it, and I didn't really like what the mod did, and I had a blue mod that was more to my play style, but it wasn't as powerful. I can never get that back until I get that mod again in some other randomized drop.
Right. Same thing. And same thing on shaders. Like you mentioned, you knew shaders were consumable, but by the same token, I thought that there's an icon that gets revealed when you hover over the shader. So it is nice that in this game, weapons have shaders, which they didn't have in Destiny 1. But when you hover over the shader, you get kind of a pop-up menu that displays any shaders that you have in your inventory, but it also has an icon to reset to the default shader. I assumed that I could do that because I just wanted to see what the default shader originally looked like. But once you do that, number one, the shader that was in that slot is gone; it's consumed, and you can't restore it unless you expend another shader that you have in your inventory. And I guess the final thing I'll say on shaders tonight, because I think we're hitting the time point where we got to hop over to playlists, maybe, is as you mentioned, shaders are consumables. So, and unlike Destiny 1, where you would apply a shader to your whole armor set, you have to apply shaders to each individual piece of armor that you have. For most of the game, that's 4 pieces. When you pass level 20, and or maybe when you pass, it may be actually after you pass the finish the single player campaign, I'm not sure. Your marks, right? The little I call them the little cod piece. That's what it is for Titans anyway. That you get. That gets a shader mod slot also, and you can start applying that to your Titan mark that you wear around your waist. That's cool because then you can make the whole outfit uniform.
Yeah, I don't know that I've looked at the mods or the shaders on the class piece, right? Whether it's the armband or the little Titan towel, I have not looked at those. But yeah,
they're definitely not there for the first significant chunk of the game. They just started appearing for me after I finished the single player campaign.
Okay, so I wonder if that's it. Is it blue versus purple, or is it unlocked at the end of the? And it could just unlock at the end of the story mode. So
yeah. So my problem is again. So you get shaders in various mixes, right? Sometimes you get 2, sometimes you get 3, sometimes you get 4 or 5. Often the best looking shaders you don't get enough to utilize across your whole armor set. So now you're faced with, do I patchwork my armor set? Do I use these 2 really good looking shaders on my armor at all? Do I use them on weapons? Like it doesn't feel as cool. The bigger problem I have is as you're playing, particularly in the levels 15 to 20 space, what you're incentivized to do is the loot drops get much more frequent. They start getting back to Destiny 1 levels after I would contend 15 levels and maybe 15 hours of game time where the loot drops feel stingy. But you start getting this you start getting this ramp up, and every time I have drum beats where I periodically go in and check my inventory right during gameplay. Anytime I go in there and I have an armor piece that has a higher armor score than whatever I'm wearing, I swap it out, right? Problem is, if you apply shaders to your helmet and you swap your helmet, now that shader's gone. By the way, there are lots of helmets that don't have a shader module slot. So the gameplay went for me, swap a helmet, swap pieces of armor, go in and verify that all 4 armor pieces have a shader module slot. And if any one of them doesn't, don't apply a shader set because you're not going to be able to make it uniform. So I would say, I can't change the helmet. I'm not going to change it now. Get new armor pieces. Now I'm like, all 4 of my armor pieces have a shader module slot. I have a set of 5 shaders of one color. I'm going to apply them, right? But now what I don't know is how long am I going to be wearing that armor, because the next time that I pick one up that's more powerful, I'm not going to continue wearing the weaker armor just because they're all one uniform color. So I kind of went through this whole rocking of the ship thing through the end of the end game, and at the end of the day, what it means shaders don't feel as effective or as valuable in the first game. I also believe in the first game, once you start applying shaders, that shader sticks as you change armor pieces out, as long as you have applied those shaders just get applied universally.
Yes, yep. In the original game, if you had a shader on, no matter if you swapped gear, it went to that shade, right? So it's interesting to hear you talk about how you felt the loot drops were stingy, right? So as somebody who didn't play the story and has spent a lot of time in running public events and heroic public events and adventures and killing the high value targets and all the other pieces, I was rolling in loot. I was either rolling in loot or I was rolling in coins and materials that I could cash in for rep, which then made me more rolling in loot. But because I knew that Shader Gate was a thing and that I couldn't really worry about it, that's not true, because I knew I was focused on the gear, and I knew that all my gear was disposable. That thinking back about Destiny 1, it wasn't until I hit toward the top of the levels and I got gear that I actually, it had the right perks that I wanted, and that I kept on consistently. But because I was still on that treadmill, and as you're talking about, right, in level 15 through 20, and even from level 20 as your power level climbs, I'm still swapping gear on a regular basis. Now I'm at the point where I'm infusing blue gear into my purple gear, which keeps my visual consistency a little bit longer. But I haven't touched shaders at all because my gear has been so disposable. The same reason I haven't really touched mods yet, because other than a few exotics, my gear and my guns have been disposable to me. And so I've just been waiting until I hit kind of that 260, 265 kind of soft cap that's there before I start figuring out, okay, this is what I'm going to roll with in these situations, or here is my high recovery, which I'm going to take into the Crucible. So yeah, I mean, I know that it's there. I could see where people who are playing this and in groups and wanting that visual consistency, I actually do kind of like the mod or the shaders of the first game more, right? Because you applied it once and it was there, and you knew that you had that color scheme. But I will also take the map system in this game over the map system in Destiny 1 any day, because there actually is a map and you can track things, right? Part of the reason I've enjoyed playing public events so much is that I'm not looking back and forth to my phone with Destiny Public Event Tracker and figuring out where the next public event is. That it's on my map and I can plop it there and it gives me a HUD marker. Granted, the map is not as good as Ubisoft's The Division, right? In The Division, you could see where your fire team was, where your clan was. You could also see where people on your friends list were that weren't even in your instance, but were somewhere in the city, right? There were lots of ways that it puts you in a community in a very kind of more real sense than the Destiny map. The Destiny map is functional in terms of navigation, but it doesn't go nearly as far as it could in terms of connecting you into other Guardians who are with you either informally around the world or formally because they're part of your clan.
So that's one thing to mention. A lot of this game is all about again, it's when I focus on it too strongly, it makes things break down for me. But you spend a lot of this game just trying to get back to where you were. I mean, heck, in some ways, at the beginning of Destiny, right? Because you have speeder bikes right at the outset of Destiny, don't you?
Within the third mission. You have to do something, but it's within the first couple of missions.
Right. So you don't get speeder bikes in this game until do you have one now?
Oh yeah, I have two actually. But I've gotten mine through Bright Ingrams. So I've gotten mine. Okay. Actually, I got mine on a couple drops. Through Tess Evers right. At the Eververse store. So no, I have, which has been a godsend to have speeder bikes. Actually, I think I have three. I've got two legendaries and one rare, but they've all been through drops.
Right. So if you don't do it that way, if you just pound through the single player campaign, you don't get speeder bikes. I got my first one. So the way I matriculated, I didn't hit level 20, and I think until I beat the final boss, or maybe now. I mentioned to you, like in the flock chat, right, that the final 4 to 5 missions of the game are all chain blocked together. So without closing the application and coming back into the game, there is no going to the tower in between those last 4 or 5 missions. You finish a mission, and when it wipes the screen, it immediately drops you into the next mission. And there is no, I don't think there's map access for you to get out and go back to, somewhere else. So one of the key things so I didn't pass level 20, so I didn't have any bright engrams, so I didn't have a speeder bike. There are some long transit distances between mission points if they are in a singular sector of a map. So some of those sectors on some maps are very large, and it can involve a longer period of walking or running or sprinting between 2 missions than I would prefer. Thankfully, between sectors in most cases, segments of the map, you can fast travel back and forth between orbital reentry points where your ship could land. If you're on the ground and you're going to a different mission sector on foot, you can fast travel. So that helps. But I was still bothered by the long distances between some of those points.
Yeah, there is. I mean, even on the EDZ, right? That there's some really long stretches there that I only discovered after getting my speeder and my Sparrow and digging around. So yeah, I could see where that would be a design frustration, and it's been called out by others as they reviewed the game early on too. So one thing I do want to mention before, as we're talking about kind of design decisions, that I've had a chance to join a clan to kind of see how that clan system works. And I've been really, really pleased with the clan system as it is. Unfortunately, the clan has a hard cap of 100, which has been set by Bungie, which comes into effect for a number of different. It creates a couple problems. But one is the clan system is really tied into the guided games, which has been getting some bad press over the last week in terms of really long queue times for people trying to do the raid, up to 45 minutes, that there are other problems, that there's not language matching. So somebody from different languages can match in, that if somebody's trying to do the raid, which has multiple checkpoints, none of those checkpoints count. So you have to do this 3 to 12 hour raid, depending on how coordinated you are, all in one setting, and not being able to come back. So there's lots of hiccups there. I'm in the Destiny the Show clan. Destiny the Show is another podcast, and in that clan for PS4, and their Xbox One clan is full. That's 100 people, and so they can't do guided games. They can't host anybody because it takes up a slot in your clan if you bring in an outsider for the guided game. So in the most robust and most full clans that are going to be active are going to be maxed out, those are the people who are probably going to be most apt to provide the guided games aspect, which again, for some context, the guided games piece is what Destiny revealed back at their May reveal event. This is what they've done for pseudo matchmaking, for the raids, for nightfalls, for things where there hasn't been any in-game system. So if you need 6 people for the raid, the guided games was supposed to provide people with the ability to solo players to kind of group up with experienced players, or at least like-minded groups to get in. And as of now, right, again, this is early, they've been doing the beta a little bit, and now they're into the full-on launch of it. There's definitely some issues, but I think because Bungie is aware of these issues, and because the community is as vocal as it is, I foresee the game continuing to evolve and finding ways to solve those issues. But otherwise, the clan system is really great, right? There's 6 different levels. We're in season 1 of a clan, which means you can only get to level 6, and at some point, probably like a Diablo, there's going to be a reset, and you're kind of cycle back through. Each level you hit is provides you with additional perks. You can, increase chance of rarer drops, increased XP earned for certain abilities, increased reputation earned. And they've also set up a nice system where the XP that any clan can earn over the course of a week is 100,000. So an individual can only earn 5,000 XP for their clan. So that's relatively easy to do. I've done it for the last 2 weeks. You can play basically anything and earn XP for your clan. What it also does is that it doesn't kind of provide preferential treatment to a giant clan where there's 100 people earning 5,000 XP all in 1 week versus the clan of 20 earning 5,000 XP for each member, right? So that it provides some equity there, which is nice. And it also, one of the nice things they do in the game, talking about back to game design aspects, is in the original Destiny where you would, within the menu, you've got your character, right? And if you slide over to the right, you have your inventory, and over to the left in Destiny 1, you had your your quest logs and your bounties and those things. In Destiny 2, if you slide over to your left, you now have clans, and so not only can you see where you're at within your rep, but you can also see all your clan members who are online and quickly join them. So it does provide some nice in-game hooks to latch, to connect with people in that clan. And the final piece of clans, which has been kind of nice as somebody who is still kind of making their way through the game and playing it in I'll admit, a rather odd way, but it also does, if your clan has completed a Nightfall, the Raid, Trials of Osiris, or Trials of the Nine, or X number of Crucible matches, everybody in the clan gets a purple engram. Everybody in the clan gets a drop that is associated with that activity. So I've been able to get an auto rifle from the Trials of the Nine, even though I'll never go flawless in PvP. There's 7 matches to get that, but because some people in my clan did, I get the auto rifle. It comes at level only 10 power, so I'd have to infuse it. But and there's been some discussion on other podcasts about this in the community. Does that disincentivize people who play their raids and those kind of end game content? But what it hasn't done, what we haven't seen yet, is we're only starting to see what the prestige, what the hard modes are for those, the gear. So this is, maybe it's providing people a taste of that, but there is even more gear to climb after. So while the guided games aspect of clans is pretty dysfunctional at this time, I've been really pleased with kind of the design system around the clan. And for anybody listening, it's definitely worth getting into because it does provide a number of other loot hooks for people who are interested. So Zeus, we hit our hour mark. We're pretty much I'm sure there's a lot more about Destiny that we can talk about, and we probably should at some point. But before we kind of wrap this up for the evening, any other final thoughts on Destiny, kind of where you're at? You finished the story. Is this something that you're going to grind yourself up to be able to play a Nightfall? Do you have your own goals with it, or are you just ready to move on to your rest of the fall games?
So I'm going to continue playing it. I'm kind of you and I have talked a little bit about our gameplay approaches and strategies for next year, game management. And one of the things I've been looking for is I wanted to pick a game where I just invest long term in the ecosystem. We talk about how there's a subset of gaming culture with people who do that with Overwatch. I have a need to play a lot of different games. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Destiny, which will consist of both Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, will be a thing that is always an option on my playlist every week. I will continue to play other things, but my frequency with which I play Destiny or Destiny 2 should be a little bit higher than the norm. And overall, what I want to do is I want to play the other classes in both Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. I've pretty much only really played a Titan across both of those games. I want to rerun the single-player campaigns of both games using different characters. I may take a slice of time and dedicate it to Crucible, because I just really haven't practiced that or played that. But yeah, and I'm gonna mess around with the subclasses. I guess my difference on approach on Destiny 2 is going to be, since I've made the initial investment up front of running through the whole single player campaign, whereas last time I basically didn't participate in any of the Destiny DLC until it was all available as a single bundle for a reduced price. I will more than likely buy the DLC for Destiny 2 every time that it comes out, as early as I can, to play through it and be one of the people who knows about it first, or at least has experienced some part of it. Is going to kind of be my approach. So I think I'm going to invest, at least for a little while, in a chunk of the remainder of this year and a chunk of 2018 are going to be, again, diving deep and participating in Destiny as a subculture and subcomponent of my overall gaming approach. What about you? So you haven't finished the single player campaign yet, or are you going to? Is it something that doesn't really matter to you? And it seems like your approach is basically you're going to become a Jedi, so that by the time you're finishing the last few missions, it's easy peasy, which was kind of the approach that I took on the original Destiny. Like I didn't hit those last end game single player missions, so I was something like level 32, and I think you're supposed to be minimum level like 17. So I was almost 2x what was required. Is that kind of the route that you think you're taking?
Yeah, so I think at least on PlayStation, I'll try to get around 260 and then kind of keep pushing forward with the story. I think really part of it is also time management within the rest of my life, where it's very convenient for me to jump in, play a couple of public events within 20 minutes and pop back out because I've got other commitments. I've actually been playing Destiny 2 remote play on the Vita from my bedroom, right? So that's even more convenient, and I can do a couple public events, from the comfort of my pajamas, and it's great. I think probably I'm going to end up, because I have it on, I'm going to end up with it on all three consoles. I've got friends and family to play with on all three consoles, and so I'm going to probably end up taking different approaches on each console, just to provide different gameplay experiences. So when I now have started a character on the Xbox, and I have all three of my previous characters, I'm going to push through the story a lot faster because I have a character that I'm connected with there. Yeah, go ahead.
When you say that on all three consoles, are you
platforms? How about that?
Okay,
so,
yeah, including PC in that.
So yeah, I have family members who have already committed to playing it on PC. A family member that I played hundreds of hours in Borderlands with, and Borderlands 2 and all of the DLC there. So he and I are committed to playing some Destiny 2 on PC, and so I'll be trying to keep pace with him on the PC end. And so I think PlayStation will end up being kind of my grindy loot aspect and casual pop in, pop out. I'll push through the stories in all three characters for Xbox, and I'll kind of slowly chip away at it with some family members on PC. But again, it'll end up being a game that's going to dominate my fall because I may not be playing it in heavy doses, but I'll be playing a lot of it on different platforms. And I'm okay with that. I'm enjoying it. It is definitely a game that I was looking forward to, and I'm glad that it came out, and it is not the disaster or PR nightmare in terms of expectations that the original one was. And truthfully, knowing what we talk about spoilers, right? Knowing what I know and we know about the ending and the ending, cutscene after the credits, I'm really excited about what comes next for Destiny in terms of lore. And, now that we kind of got the side story out of the way, let's get back to this world that Bungie has been creating.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Sounds great.
All right, so that is our show for tonight. We have all Destinied out, and so when Swiss and Prime hear us starting to talk about Destiny, they'll tell us that we've had our chance. We had our Destiny rant, and now it is time to move on to the rest of the games this fall. We've got a couple this week. We've got Forza coming out. We've got a couple other games starting to hit this October here, so we've got plenty on our playlist to come back to. There's also, again, because it is the fall, there's some news that continues to come out. So this Thursday, we will be probably coming to you live on this channel, but also check back if you're listening to this the audio or the video version. It will be back up, maybe with a little bit of a delay on Thursday night into Friday morning or the weekend, as we still kind of figure out our hosting preferences and where we go from here. But again, please continue to keep an eye on social media as we continue to try to keep our audience updated on where we're going to be and what comes next for us. So Zeus, any final words for this evening?
No, other than head over to Rounding Off Affinity and check out gaming videos, Let's Plays, live streams over there. So most recent updates include a little bit of Dirt 2, as well as some Skylanders Imaginators, and I've gotten some Resident Evil 7 footage this week that I will probably be posting at some point, hopefully soon.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again for all the behind-the-scenes work, Zeus, and navigating where our hosting is going on. And for the rest of you, hopefully that no matter where we're hosting from, that the wonderful information and insightful dialogue that we continue to bring you will be enough to keep going week after week and month after month. So until next time, no matter where we're at, this is enough to keep going. Have a good night.